Patricia Campbell Hearst is the member of the Hearst family and granddaughter of American publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst and philanthropist Phoebe Hearst. She first became known for the events following her 1974 kidnapping by the Symbionese Liberation Army. She was found and arrested 19 months after being abducted, by which time she was a fugitive wanted for serious crimes committed with members of the group. She was held in custody, and there was speculation before trial that her family's resources would enable her to avoid time in prison. At her trial, the prosecution suggested that Hearst had joined the Symbionese Liberation Army of her own volition. However, she testified that she had been R-worded and threatened with unaliving while held captive. In 1974, she was convicted of bank robbery and sentenced to 35 years in prison, later reduced to 7 years. Her sentence was commuted by President Jimmy Carter, and she was later pardoned by President Bill Clinton. Hearst, who prefers to be called Patricia, was born on the 20th of February 1954 in San Francisco, California, the third of 5 daughters of Randolph Apperson Hearst and Catherine Wood Campbell. She was raised primarily in Hillsborough and attended the private Crystal Springs School for Girls there, Sacred Heart in Atherton, and the Santa Catalina School in Monterey. She attended Menlo College in Atherton, California before transferring to the University of California, Berkeley. The family wielded immense political influence and had opposed organised labour, gold mine workers' rights and communism before World War II. Hearst's father was among the member of the heirs to the family fortune that did not control the Hearsts' interests. Her family had not considered it necessary to take preventative measures to ensure their children's personal security. At the time of her abduction, Hearst was a sophomore at Berkeley studying art history. She lived with her fiancé, Stephen Weed, in an apartment in Berkeley. On the 4th of February 1974, 19-year-old Hearst was kidnapped from a Berkeley apartment. A small urban guerrilla left-wing group called the Symbionese Liberation Army claimed responsibility for the abduction. Hearst's kidnapping was partly opportunistic, as she resided near the SLA hideout. According to testimony at trial, the group's main intention was to leverage the Hearst family's political influence to free an SLA members, Russ Little and Joe Romino, who had been arrested for the November 1973 unaliving of Marcus Foster, superintendent of Oakland Public Schools. After the state refused to free them, the SLA demanded that Hearst family distribute $70 worth of food to every needy Californian, an operation that would cost an estimated $400 million. In response, Hearst's father obtained a loan and arranged the immediate donation of $2 million worth of food for the poor of the Bay Area for 1 year in a project called People in Need. After the distribution descended into chaos, the SLA refused to release Hearst. According to Hearst's testimony at a 1976 trial, she was held for a week in a closet, blindfolded, with her hands tied. During this time, SLA founder Clinique Donald DeFries repeatedly threatened her with unaliving. She was allowed to leave the closet for meals, still blindfolded, and began to participate in the group's political discussions. She was given a flashlight for reading and SLA political tracts to memorise. Hearst was confined in the closet for weeks. She said, in an April 1974 account, Hearst claimed that she had been offered the choice of being released or joining the SLA. When asked for a decision, Hearst elected to remain and fight with the SLA. The blindfold was removed, allowing her to see her captors for the first time. After this, she was given daily lessons on her duties, especially weapon drills. Angela Atwood told Hearst that the others wanted Hearst to share in the actual freedom among the unit. Hearst later claimed to have been R-worded by William Willie Wolfe and DeFries. On the 3rd of April 1974, 2 months after she'd been abducted, Hearst announced to an audio tape released to the media that she joined the SLA and adopted the name Tanya, a tribute to Che Guevara's comrade Heidi Tamara Burke Bider. On the 15th of April 1974, Hearst was recorded on surveillance video wielding an M1 carbine while robbing the Sunset District branch of the Hibernia Bank at 1450 Noriega Street in San Francisco. Hearst, identified under the pseudonym of Tanya, yelled. 2 men entered the bank while the robbery was occurring and shot and wounded by the SLA. According to testimony at her trial, a witness thought that Hearst had been several paces behind the others when running to the getaway car. Attorney General William B. Saxby said that Hearst was a common criminal and not a reluctant participant in the bank robbery. James L. Browning Jr. said that her participation in the robbery may have been voluntary, contrasting with an earlier comment in which he said that she might have been coerced into taking part. The FBI agent heading the investigation said that the SLA members were photographed pointing guns at Hearst during the robbery. On the 16th of May 1974, the manager at Mel's Sporting Goods in Inglewood, California, observed a minor theft by William Harris, who had been shopping with his wife, Emily, while Hearst waited across the road in a van. The manager and an employee followed Harris out and confronted him. There was a scuffle and the manager restrained Harris when a pistol fell out of Harris's waistband. Hearst discharged the entire magazine of an automatic carbine into the overhead storefront, causing the manager to dive behind a light post. He tried to shoot back, but Hearst began aiming closer. Hearst and the Harris couple hijacked 2 cars and abducted the owners. One was a young man who found Hearst so pleasant that he was reluctant to report the incident. He testified at trial that heard discussing the effectiveness of cyanide-tipped bullets and repeatedly asking him if he was okay. Police had surrounded the main base of the SLA in Los Angeles before these 3 returned, so they hid elsewhere. The 6 SLA members inside the hideout died. There was an hour-long gunfight with police and 2 members were fatally shot. A fire broke out in the house in which the remainder died, but DeFries first killed himself by gunshot. It was initially thought that Hearst had died during this confrontation. Warrants were issued for the arrest of Hearst and Harris's for several felonies, including 2 counts of kidnapping. Emily Harris went to a Berkeley rally to commemorate the deaths of Angela Atwood, Solist, and DeFries, the other founding members of the SLA who had died in Los Angeles during the police siege. Harris recognised Atwood's acquaintance Kathy Celaya among the radicals who she had known from the civil rights groups. Celaya introduced the 3 fugitives to Jack Scott, an athletics reformer and radical, and he agreed to provide them with help and money. Hearst helped make improvised explosive devices. These were used in 2 unsuccessful attempts to unalive police officers during August 1975. One of the devices failed to detonate. Marked money found in the apartment where she was arrested linked Hearst to the SLA armed robbery of Crocker National Bank in Carmichael, California. She was the getaway car driver for the robbery. Myrna Asapil, a mother of 4 who was at the bank making a deposit, was shot dead by a masked Emily Harris. Hearst was potentially at risk for felony murder charges and could testify as a witness against Harris for a capital offence. On the 18th of September 1975, Hearst was arrested in San Francisco apartment with Wendy Yoshimura, another SLA member, by San Francisco Police Inspector Timothy F. Casey and his partner, Police Officer Lawrence R. Pesaro, and FBI Special Agent Thomas J. Padden and his partners, FBI agents Jason Moultron, Frank Doyle Jr., Larry Lawler, Monte Hall, Dick Vitamonte, Leo Brastinison, and Ray Campos. While being booked into jail, Hearst listed her occupation as urban guerrilla. She asked her attorney to relay the following message. At the time of her arrest, Hearst's weight had dropped to 40 kilograms, and she was described by psychologist Margaret Singer in October 1975 as low IQ effect zombie. Shortly after her arrest, doctors recorded signs of trauma. Her IQ was measured as 112, whereas it had previously been 130. There were huge gaps in her memory regarding her pre-Tanya life. She was smoking heavily and had nightmares. Without a mental illness or defect, a person is considered to be fully responsible for any criminal action done under duress, which is defined as a clear and present threat of death or serious injury. For Hearst to secure an acquittal on the grounds of having been brainwashed would have been completely unprecedented. Psychiatrist Louis Joylan West, a professor at University of California, was appointed by the court in his capacity as a brainwashing expert and worked without a fee. After the trial, he wrote a newspaper article asking President Carter to release Hearst from prison. Hearst wrote in her memoir, Every Secret Thing, 1982, after some weeks in custody, Hearst repudiated her SLA allegiance. Her first lawyer, Terence Hallen, had advised Hearst not to talk to anyone, including psychiatrists. He advocated a judgment of involuntary intoxication that the SLA had given her drugs that affected her judgment and recollection. He was replaced by attorney F. Lee Bailey, who asserted a defence of coercion or duress affecting intent at the time of the offence. This was similar to the brainwashing defence that Hanlon had warned was not a defence in law. Hearst gave long interviews to various psychiatrists. Hearst was arraigned for the Hibernia Bank robbery. The trial commenced on the 15th of January 1976. Judge Oliver Jesse Carter ruled that Hearst's taped and written statements after the bank robbery while she was a fugitive with the SLA members were voluntary. He did not allow expert testimony that stylistic analysis indicated that the Tanya statements and writing were not wholly composed by Hearst. He permitted the prosecution to introduce statements and actions Hearst made long after the Hibernia robbery as evidence of a state of mind at the time of the robbery. Judge Carter also allowed into evidence a recording made by jail authorities of a friend jail visit with Hearst, in which Hearst used profanities and spoke of her radical and feminist beliefs, but he did not allow tapes of psychiatrist Louis Joylan West's interviews of Hearst to be heard by the jury. Judge Carter was described as resting his eyes during testimony favourable to the defence by West and others. According to Hearst's testimony, her captors had demanded she appear enthusiastic during the robbery and warned that she would pay with her life for any mistake. Her defence lawyer, F. Lee Bailey, provided photographs showing that SLA members, including Camilla Hall, had pointed guns at Hearst during the robbery. In reference to the shooting at Mel's Sporting Goods store and her decision not to escape, Hearst testified that she was instructed throughout her captivity on what to do in emergencies. She said one class in particular had a situation similar to the store manager's detention of the Harrises. Hearst testified that, testifying for prosecution, Dr. Harry Kozol said Hearst had been a rebel in search of a cause and her participation in the Hibernia robbery had been an act of free will. Prosecutor James L. Browning Jr. asked other psychiatrists testing for the prosecution, Dr. Joel Fort, if Hearst was in fear of death or great bodily injury during the robbery, to which he answered, no. Bailey angrily objected. Fort assessed Hearst as amoral and said that she had voluntarily had sex with Wolf de Vries, which Hearst denied both in court and outside. Prosecutor Browning tried to show that writings by Hearst indicated her testimony had been misinterpreted her actions with Wolf. She said that she'd been writing the SLA version of events and that she'd been punched in the face by William Harris when she refused to be more effusive about what she regarded as SA by Wolf. Judge Carter allowed testimony from the prosecution's psychiatrist about Hearst's early actual experiences, although these had occurred years before her kidnapping and the bank robbery. In court, Hearst made a poor impression and appeared lethargic. An Associated Press report attributed this state to drugs she was given by jail doctors. Bailey was strongly criticised for his decision to put Hearst on the stand, then having her repeatedly decline to answer questions. According to Alan Dershowitz, Bailey was wrong-footed by the judge, who had appeared to indicate she would have Fifth Amendment privilege. The jury would not be present for some of her testimony, or would be instructed not to draw interferences on matters subsequent to the Hibernia Bank charges for which she was being tried, but he changed his mind. After a few months, Hearst provided information to the authorities, not under oath. Sworn testimony would have been used to convict her of SLA activities. A bomb exploded at Hearst Castle in February 1976. After Hearst testified that Wolf had SA'd her, Emily Harris gave a magazine interview from jail alleging that Hearst keeping the trinket given to her by Wolf was an indication that she had been in a romantic relationship with him. Hearst said that she had kept the stone carving because she thought it was a pre-Columbian artifact of archaeological significance. The prosecutor, James L. Browning Jr., used Harris's interpretation of the item. Some jurors later said that they regarded the carving which Browning waved in front of them as powerful evidence that Hearst was lying. In his closing argument, Prosecutor Browning suggested that Hearst had taken part in the bank robbery without coercion. Browning, who later became a judge, also suggested to the jury that, as the female SLA members were feminists, they would not have allowed Hearst to be R-worded. In her autobiography, Hearst expressed disappointment with what she saw as Bailey's lack of focus in the crucial end stage of her trial. She described him as having the appearance of someone with a hangover and spilling water down the front of his pants while making a disjointed closing argument. Bailey's final statement to the court was, on the 20th of March 1976, Hearst was convicted of bank robbery and using a firearm during the commission of a felony. She was given the maximum sentence possible of 35 years imprisonment, pending a rejection at the final sentence hearing, which Carter declined to specify. Because Judge Carter had died, Judge William H. Orrick Jr. determined her sentence. He gave her 7 years imprisonment, commenting that rebellious young people who, for whatever reason become revolutionaries and voluntarily commit criminal acts will be punished. Hearst was imprisoned at the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin, California. She suffered a collapsed lung in prison, the beginning of a series of medical problems, and she underwent emergency surgery. This prevented her from appearing to testify against the Harrises on 11 charges, including robbery, kidnapping, and assault. She was also arraigned for those charges. She was held in solitary confinement for security reasons. She was granted bail for an appeal hearing in November 1976 on the condition that she was protected on bond. Her father hired dozens of bodyguards. Superior Court Judge Talbot Callister gave her probation on the sporting goods store charge when she pleaded no contest, saying that he believed that she had been subject to coercion amounting to torture. California Attorney General Avell J. Younger said that if there was a double standard for the wealthy, it was the opposite of what was genuinely believed, and that Hearst had received a stiffer sentence than a person of lesser means might have. He stated that she had no legal brainwashing defence, but pointed out that the events had started with her kidnapping. Hearst's bail was revoked on May 1978 when appeals failed and the Supreme Court declined to hear her case. The prison took new special security measures for her safety until she found a dead rat on her bunk on the day when William and Emily Harris were arraigned for her abduction. The Harrises were convicted on a simple kidnapping charge, and they were released after serving a total of 8 years each. Representative Leo Ryan was collecting signatures on a petition for Hearst's release several weeks before being murdered while visiting the Jonestown settlement in Guyana. Actor John Wayne spoke after the Jonestown cult deaths, stating that people had accepted that Jim Jones had brainwashed 900 individuals into mass suicide, but could not accept that the Symbionese Liberation Army could have brainwashed a kidnapped teenage girl. President Jimmy Carter commuted Hearst's federal sentence to the 22 months served, freeing her 8 months before she was liable for her first parole hearing. Her release on the 1st of February 1979 was under stringent conditions, and she remained on probation for the state sentence with a sporting goods store plea. She recovered full civil rights when President Bill Clinton granted her a pardon on 20th of January 2001, his last day in office. 2 months after her release from prison, Hearst married Bernard Lee Shaw, born in 1945, a policeman who was part of her security detail during her time on bail. They had 2 children, Gillian and Lydia Hearst Shaw, and her husband passed away in 2013. Hearst became involved in a foundation helping children with AIDS and was active in other charities and fundraising activities.